She stood barefoot on the wooden platform, belly round beneath a patched blue dress. The summer heat clung to her skin like shame. Her wrists were tied loosely, not because they feared she'd run, but because she wouldn't. The crowd didn't whisper. They stared. "She's no good for nothing," muttered a man chewing tobacco, spitting inches from her foot. Already carrying some drifter's mistake, her uncle waved a crooked cane like he was auctioning a calf. "She eats little. Don't speak much. Strong enough to scrub and bear. Take her cheap." Some laughed. One man offered a mule in jest. Another, a half bottle of whiskey. No one asked her name. A baby kicked inside her belly. She blinked but did not cry. The rope around her wrist rubbed raw. She didn't flinch. That kind of pain had long become familiar. She had been sold once already. At 13, to a rancher with cold hands and dead eyes. This was just the second round across the dusty fairground. Past the tents and smoke of roasted meat stood a man carved from stillness. He did not belong among them, not by dress, nor by silence. His braid reached past his shoulders. A red feather clung behind his left ear. His eyes were shadowed beneath the brim of a weather-worn hat. He watched her without blinking. She didn't see him yet. Back on the platform, her uncle grew frustrated. "Don't make me drag her back." Last time she tried to throw herself in the river. "No man wants that trouble." The girl looked up slowly. Her voice cracked open like dry bark. "Don't give me away," she said, soft but certain. "Please." "I'm already gone." Laughter. Disgust, then silence because someone had stepped forward. The Lakota warrior moved without sound, but with the kind of weight that made others move aside. He stood at the base of the platform. No weapon, no money, just a voice like thunder whispered through cotton. "I will take her," the uncle scoffed. "You got coin, savage." "I offer nothing," he said. "Because she is not for sale." The girl stared, mouth parted. No one had said that before. Not once. "You can't just, she carries life," the warrior said, louder now, his hand resting near the hilt of a knife he hadn't yet drawn. "And she will raise it. Among my people," a murmur rippled through the crowd. "She will be the matriarch of my tribe." No one laughed now, even the mule trader swallowed hard. The girl's rope fell to the dirt. She didn't run, she simply stepped down. Like walking from a dream, and followed him into the dust. They rode in silence, her behind him on a borrowed mule, the weight of their silence heavier than the sun overhead. Dust curled from the trail, soft as breath, clinging to her skin like memory. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't ask her name. Names were a luxury where she came from. The kind you lose when no one cares to remember them. Her real name had been swallowed the day her mother died giving birth to her. After that, folks called her whatever suited their mood. Useless, mule-eyed, whore. She never corrected them. The child inside her moved again. A soft reminder she wasn't alone. Even if no one else had remembered, they passed through fields gone brittle from sun and silence. She watched the wind stir the dry wheat and thought of the night. She ran, barefoot and broken, from a house that never let her sleep without a lock on the door. She hadn't cried that night either. She'd walked till her feet split. Then hitched rides with wagons, sold her hands for scraps. And then her uncle found her, claimed her like property. Like a cow that wandered too far, she still had the scar on her left ankle from the chain he used to teach her. Now she sat behind a stranger with feathers in his hair, riding away from the noise of men who had measured her by the weight of her belly. Still, fear clung to her ribs. Why had he spoken? No one did that. No one stepped forward. She watched him from behind, the way his shoulders moved like stone beneath the worn buckskin. His hair shimmered in streaks of silver and black, Like a hawk in twilight, he hadn't touched her. Not even to help her mount the mule. He simply offered his hand, palm open, eyes never daring to pity that unnerved her more than anything, because pity she knew how to fight. But kindness? That disarmed her. By dusk, they reached the edge of the forest, where the trail narrowed into a crease of pine. He dismounted first and waited, not saying a word. She slid down, careful not to stumble. "I ain't strong," she said quietly. He tilted his head, not quite smiling. "You're standing," he replied. Inside a small clearing stood a wooden hut, rough, hand-built, framed with cedar beams and patched with mud between planks. A fire pit lay cold nearby. Smoke hadn't touched this place in days. He opened the door for her, stepped aside. "You can leave," he said finally. "Or stay. I won't bind you." Her chest tightened. She stepped inside. The walls were bare. No beds. Just woven mats. A blanket folded at the foot of a trunk. Herbs hung from a beam. The air smelled of cedar and something faintly sweet, like dried berries. She sat slowly on the floor. Her knees shook. He crouched beside the fire pit outside, began stacking wood in silence. Inside, she touched her belly. The child stirred again. She whispered to it, "We might be somewhere safe." Then her voice cracked. "For the first time in days, I don't even know if that's real." The wind rustled the trees outside like voices long dead, and for the first time in her life, no one yelled for her to be quiet. He did not ask where she came from. He did not ask about the child's father. That night, he brought water from the stream in a clay pot and left it beside her. Then he sat outside and smoked in silence, the scent of sage curling up into the black sky like prayers no one dared say aloud. She watched him through the small opening in the wall. His stillness was not passive, it was intentional. Every motion he made seemed chosen, anchored. Even in the dark, he carried himself like he belonged to the land. When morning came, she found a small fire lit beside the hut and a flat cake of corn resting on a stone. He sat cross-legged nearby, carving something in a piece of birch. She sat beside the fire without speaking. After a while, she whispered, "You don't have to feed me." He looked up slowly. "You're not a burden." She almost laughed. It would have sounded like breaking glass. No one's ever said that. His eyes held hers for a moment, then drifted to the hills beyond the trees. "I was not always alone," he said. His voice had weight. Not loud, but shaped like river stones softened by years, still unmovable. "I had a wife. She died when the sickness came. Took our boy with her." The girl froze, fingers curling around her knees. He didn't flinch at the memory. Didn't traumatize. He simply laid it in the air like something sacred and heavy, not to be explained. She wanted to ask more, but didn't. Instead, she said, "My uncle said I was cursed." He turned his head slightly. "Because I couldn't keep quiet. Because I asked too many questions. Because I bled too early. Because I came back pregnant." The baby kicked. She wiped her eyes roughly. "I didn't want no child." The warrior didn't respond right away. He let the wind fill the space. "My father used to say," he began, "sometimes the seed doesn't choose where to fall, but it grows anyway." She looked at him, searching. He handed her the carved wood. It was a small figure of a woman, arms stretched upward. Primitive but tender. "It's for your fire," he said. "She's called Weiya, the one who carries warmth." She clutched it, unsure why it felt like an offering, like something more than wood. That day, she watched him work. He repaired the chicken pen behind the hut, fed the horse, and gathered herbs from the woods with reverence. He did not talk much, but he noticed when her feet swelled, and he crushed willow bark for tea. He noticed when her hands trembled, and He brought her a woven shawl to wrap her belly. Not once did he look at her with ownership. Not once did he ask for anything in return. At dusk, she asked, "Why did you say that?" Back at the fair, he didn't look up. "Because you didn't lower your eyes," he said. Even with the rope on your wrists, she looked away then. Embarrassed, afraid of what he saw. Later that night, he spoke again from outside the hut, voice quiet but firm. "My people believe the strongest women don't carry weapons. They carry names, bloodlines." Fire. She closed her eyes. That night, sleep came for her like a wave in a dry land. She dreamed of red feathers, wind through pine, and a child laughing among tall grass. And when she woke, the carving of WEIO was warm in her hand. The days that followed were not marked by grand events, but by small mercies. She learned the rhythm of the woods, how the sun touched the edge of the hut just before noon, how the pine trees whispered differently at dusk. The warrior, his name still unspoken between them, rose before dawn and walked into the trees, always returning with something useful: roots, water, news from the wind. He brought her a wooden bowl carved with the shape of a bear and said nothing about it. She cleaned it like it mattered. Like she mattered, she began to sweep the floor without being asked. Not because she owed, but because the act gave her back a piece of herself. At night, he taught her how to listen, not to him, but to the world. "You hear that?" he asked once, pointing to the dark above the hut. She strained. "I don't hear anything. That's the sound of the owls gone quiet." She looked at him. "That's a sound?" "When silence replaces warning," he said, "you learn to listen deeper." It was the first time she truly saw him as more than just a rescuer. He wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't asking her to become someone else. He was simply offering a stillness where her old names could fall away. One morning, she was hanging damp cloth on a line when the baby turned sharply inside her. She dropped the cloth and braced the tree beside her. Gasping, he appeared beside her so quietly it startled her. "I'm fine." She lied. He looked down at her hands, clenched too tightly. "You're not," he said, and walked toward the hut. Minutes later, he returned with warm, moss-soaked and boiled leaves and a deer hide wrap for her belly. He didn't try to touch her. He simply laid the items nearby and walked back into the woods. That evening, she sat beside the fire and whispered, "You don't treat me like I'm broken." He stared into the flames for a long time. "My wife. She bled for 3 days after our son. The healers said she couldn't carry again. She wept into the river and cursed her womb. But she wasn't broken. She was just tired of carrying everything alone." Tears slipped down the girl's cheek without her noticing. "You don't have to speak," he said gently, "but the land will listen when you're ready." She wanted to believe that. She wanted it so badly it hurt. She stayed up late that night, watching embers float into the dark sky like forgotten spirits. When the wind shifted, she swore she could smell her mother's hair lavender and wood smoke. In the days that followed, she began to hum. It was barely a sound. Just a note carried between trees while she gathered herbs or pressed her hands to her belly at dawn. He never commented, but one morning, he left her a strand of beads at her door. Lakota beads, blue, white, and red, strung in a spiral. For protection, she guessed. She wore them over her heart. When the rains came, he built her a chair from pine, so she wouldn't have to sleep on the mat. She woke one night to find him asleep by the doorway, spear across his lap. Guarding silently, while thunder rolled beyond the hills, the fire never went out again, and neither did her hum. It was early autumn when the wind changed, not the breeze itself, but the way the birds went quiet too early. The firewood didn't burn the same. And the dog, an old black mutt that had wandered to the hut weeks ago, began to growl low into the trees at night. He noticed first the Lakota warrior stood longer each evening at the ridge above the clearing, scanning the line between shadow and sky. His bow hung across his back now, even when he gathered herbs. His eyes had sharpened not with fear, but with memory. She noticed, too, "How long have you felt it?" She asked one dusk, her voice small. He turned slowly. 2 days. Is it him? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Her fingers gripped the doorway. Her breath turned shallow. She hadn't spoken her uncle's name since the day she left that fairground. But the feeling in her gut was unmistakable, like poison. Blooming in her ribs, he was coming, and he would not come alone. Why now? She whispered, because men who trade women don't let go of things they think they own. That night, she did not hum. She sat by the fire with her knees drawn up and watched the stars disappear behind thick clouds. "I don't want to run again," she said. He looked at her. "You don't have to, but if he comes here, if he comes," the warrior said softly, "he'll find more than a girl he once tried to sell." His calm wasn't empty. It was built on bloodlines, on generations who had stood their ground, not because they wanted war, but because they had no choice. She didn't sleep that night. She sat with the carving of We'iya in her hands and whispered names into the dark. Not her own, but names she would give her child if they survived. When morning came, she went into the forest and helped him gather stones. Together, they rebuilt the low wall around the hut's perimeter. She didn't ask why. She already knew. At dusk, he placed 4 feathers at each corner of the clearing, black-tipped hawk feathers bound with sinew. She asked what they meant. "They tell the spirits who belongs here," he said. "And who does not?" 3 days passed. On the 4th, they saw smoke rising from the southern ridge, scouting fire. He murmured, "By evening." She heard voices, distant, angry, male. One of them called her name, her old name, the one she had buried beneath pine needles and prayer. She froze. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing danger. She gripped the doorframe. The warrior stepped beside her, bow in hand. "I'll go," she said suddenly. "If I leave, maybe he'll." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "You're not something to be bartered, but I don't want blood." He nodded slowly. "Neither do I." She stepped outside. The wind caught her hair. "I was sold for a sack of grain," she said, her voice shaking. "And then again for a mule." He didn't look surprised, but here, she continued, "I've been given fire and food and silence that doesn't hurt. If I lose that now." "You won't," he said. Then he lifted his bow and walked toward the trees. She watched him disappear into the forest, quiet as breath. When night fell, torches appeared at the edge of the clearing. 3 men, her uncle among them, face red from drink, voice loud with entitlement. "She's mine," he bellowed. "That's my blood she's carrying." "No," a voice said from the trees. The warrior stepped forward, alone, unflinching. "She belongs to no one. But she is under my protection." The torches flickered. The uncle laughed. "She's nothing but a whore with a belly full of shame." The warrior didn't flinch. "She is We'iya. She is fire. She will be the mother of leaders." "You gonna fight for her, red man?" The uncle spat. "No," the warrior said, drawing his bow. "I will bury what doesn't belong to this land." A beat passed, then silence. Then the men turned. Not because of the bow, but because of the stillness. The power. The knowing that this was sacred ground now. And the girl they came to claim had already become more than they could name. The torches vanished into the dark. She fell to her knees when he returned. He knelt beside her, and for the first time, she reached for his hand, not because she was afraid, but because something had changed. She wasn't a girl hiding anymore. She was a woman who had been seen and named. The following morning, the world felt different. The air was sharp, stripped of the heaviness that had lingered for days. The pine trees no longer leaned inward like sentinels, and the silence no longer pressed down. It hovered, waiting, listening. She woke before the sun. Her hands trembled as she built the fire herself, slowly, carefully, like arranging a heart from ash. Each stick she laid was a memory, each spark a name returned to her. He watched from the doorway, arms crossed, not interfering when the flames caught. She looked at him not for approval, but recognition. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she said. He nodded. "You're not." She stepped outside with her blanket draped over her shoulders. Her belly was heavy, but she no longer moved as if it shamed her. She moved as if she carried a future. Later that morning, the dog barked once, then wagged its tail. A child stepped out from behind the tree line. A girl, maybe 10, hair braided in the Lakota way, face curious. "She's from the winter camp," he said. "My sister's daughter." The girl ran to him, giggling, then stopped when she saw the woman. There was a long pause. Then the girl stepped forward, handed her a single pine cone tied with red twine. A gift. The woman knelt slowly, touched the child's hand. "Thank you." They shared a smile when the child ran off again to chase the dog. The woman looked back at the man. "You told your people about me?" He shook his head. "I told them about the woman who held the fire through the night." That evening, he asked her to sit by the stone ring where he often sang to the stars. "I never sang before," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "The fire knows your voice already." He lit a flame and dropped sage onto it. The scent rose clean, ancient, familiar. It wrapped around her like a name long forgotten. Her heart beat heavy in her throat. "You're not the girl from the fair," he said gently. "Not anymore. I don't know who I am." He reached into his satchel, pulled out a long beaded cord, blue and red, woven with bone discs and tiny silver bells. He placed it in her hands. "My grandmother gave it to my mother when she became matriarch. My mother gave it to my wife. It belongs to no one, but it always knows where to go." She stared at it, speechless. He took her hands. "Your child will be born under these trees. And when they ask who their mother is, we will say, 'She walked through fire without turning to ash.'" A sob escaped her throat, sudden, sharp, not from sadness, from recognition, from becoming. That night, a storm came. Thunder echoed like drums through the valley. Rain pounded the roof. The baby came before dawn. No screams, just breath, held long, then broken. He stayed with her the whole time, not as healer, not as savior, but as stillness, as shelter. When the child finally cried, it sounded like the wind through feathers. He wrapped the newborn in deerskin, placed them on her chest. "You have walked a long way," he whispered. "Now rest. Let the child carry what comes next." She wept, not for the pain, but because it felt like a new name was being sung over her, not with words, but with earth and breath and heat. The baby gripped her finger. The fire crackled, and in that moment, she understood. She had not been chosen by chance. She had been seen. She had been named. She had become the fire she once feared. The forest exhaled in long, steady breaths. A hush had fallen over the land, not of stillness, but of fullness. The kind that only comes after pain has left its mark and chosen not to return. She lay beneath the woven roof of the hut, her child curled against her chest, skin to skin. The air smelled of wet earth, of pine washed clean by the storm, of beginnings that didn't ask permission. Outside, the warrior stirred the embers gently, coaxing heat back into the morning. He had not slept. He didn't need to. There was peace. Enough in watching the steam rise from a bowl of cedar water inside. She was humming again, a lullaby this time. One she had never learned, but seemed to have always known. She no longer worried about the name she'd carry. She had been called many things. But now, in the hush between the baby's breaths, she heard something else take shape, a name not given. But grown, matriarch. The word came slowly, like the return of color to a frostbitten hand. She remembered the girl from the winter camp, how she'd placed a pine cone in her palm without flinching. She remembered the way her belly had been wrapped in deerskin, not as shame, but as strength. That morning, when the warrior stepped into the hut, she looked up at him and smiled, not with her mouth, but with every inch of her face. "She's a girl." She whispered. He crouched beside her, placed a hand near the baby's shoulder without touching. "I see that. I want to call her son." He nodded. "It means the time when the sun touches the trees." She looked down at the child's tiny hand gripping her shawl. "She found me in the dark," she said. "But she'll grow in the light." He sat beside her and unwrapped a bundle of herbs. He didn't say what they were for. She knew. She took the mixture and laid it above the door. The fire popped softly in the corner. A robin sang somewhere beyond the hut, and for the first time since she could remember, her body felt like her own. Later that day, they walked together slowly, her hand on his arm, the baby against her chest, into the clearing beyond the ridge. The grass was high and wet with dew, and the sun poured through the trees in long, golden fingers. A few women from the winter camp had come. They did not stare. They did not ask questions. They offered broth, and they brought feathers. One woman, older than the trees themselves, touched the baby's forehead with a thumb stained in ochre. "She belongs to the people," she said. The girl felt her knees soften. But the warrior steadied her. "You belong too," he whispered. She didn't respond, not with words. She looked around her. At the trees, and the smoke, and the woman who pressed a beaded bracelet into her hand and said, simply, "For strength." She hadn't cried since the birth, but now the tears came not from fear or sadness or even joy, but from the strange and sudden feeling of home. That night, as they sat by the fire and the baby slept between them, she asked him, "Will she know?" He turned toward her. "Know what?" "Who she came from. Who I used to be." He stirred the fire gently. "She'll know who you became." And in that soft orange glow, beneath stars older than memory, the wind carried the scent of cedar, and a name was whispered not to the woman but from her, a name not born in shame or fear or trade, but in flame. And from that night on, when the women of the winter camp spoke of the girl who walked into fire and stayed, they did not call her the one who had been sold. They called her the one who made the fire her home. The sky was pale with dawn when she stepped outside alone, wrapped in a shawl of soft wool dyed in rust and clay. The child stirred gently against her chest, but did not wake. The world was hushed, not out of mourning, but reverence. A fine mist clung low across the meadow, silvering the tall grass, making every step she took feel like moving through another realm, a space between the past and what comes next. She walked to the fire circle where he waited. He was crouched over the embers, blowing gently. He didn't turn when she approached. She sat beside him, unwrapping the baby slowly. "She opens her eyes when the wind shifts," she said. "Just like you." He smiled without showing teeth. "She listens to the earth. It remembers her." She laid the baby in the warm center of a buffalo hide. The fire popped once, then quieted. She placed a feather beside the child's hand, not as decoration, but as declaration. He looked at her with the stillness of stone shaped by centuries. "Do you want to speak?" he asked. "No," she said. "I've said too much in my life." Now I want the land to speak for me." And so they sat, side by side, as the mist lifted and the sky turned the color of soft bone. From the trees, voices came not, loud, not invasive. Women singing, not to her, but around her. A song not of celebration nor ceremony, but of continuation. She recognized none of the words, but her body did. The old woman approached with a bowl of water drawn from the winter spring. She dipped a branch of pine into it, then gently anointed the baby's head. "Son," the elder whispered, "may your mother's fire guide your way." She touched the young woman's face, "And may your name carry more than sorrow now." Afterward, they placed the child in a cradle board woven of willow and sage. She would sleep there near the fire under the stars. That evening, he gave her a new shawl embroidered with the symbol of the sun nested within for arrows. East, west, north, south, your place is here, he said, because you now carry all directions within you. She didn't reply. She simply rested her head against his shoulder, and for the first time, there was no storm waiting, no footsteps behind them, no name she feared hearing spoken aloud. There was only this: a warm child, a strong fire, a man who saw her, and a world that no longer turned without her. That night, when the fire dimmed and the stars returned to their posts above the treetops, she looked down at the sleeping child and whispered a promise, not one of protection, but of presence. "I am here," she said, "and I will remain." The wind answered her. So did the earth, and from that morning on, the trail that led to the hut never stayed empty long. Women came with herbs, children came with stories, and men came to learn what kind of strength could live in silence. Since that morning, the fire never went out again. Would you have stood for her when no one else did? Tell us in the comments what this story meant to you, and if you believe that redemption sometimes comes on horseback and whispers your name at dawn. Subscribe to Silent Ranch.